The Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew, the 10th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus said to the 12, "Whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet in the name of the prophet will receive a prophet's reward, and whoever welcomes a righteous person in the name of a righteous person will receive the reward of the righteous. And whoever gives even a cold cup of water to one of these little ones in the name of a disciple, I truly tell you, none of these will lose their reward." The Gospel of the Lord. Please be seated. Grace, peace, and mercy are yours from the triune God. Amen. Last Sunday, I had the great pleasure to join Bishop Jim Gonia, the bishops from the United Methodist Church and the Episcopal churches, and over 100 other Christians who decided to walk in celebration and support of love in all of its different glorious expressions in the Denver Pride Parade. It was wonderful. A big thank you to the women of the church and all of you who sent me and the youth group off to represent St. Mark's well in the Pride Festival. I really hope more of you have the opportunity to try and come next year. It was so very, very, very cool to see the church put people in a parade to show people that God really does love them for who they are and that we, the church, care about them for who they are. Specifically because the church, as we know, has not always been very good at telling people who are LGBTQIA that they are loved by God for exactly who they are, for exactly who they love. Showing up at the Pride Parade is a good first step, but we still have a long way to go. Story from the day. While we were lining up in Cheeseman Park for the parade to start, there's floats and different groups all the way around the outside edge of it. We had a worship service under a tree with over 100 Christians from various different denominations and churches share communion, sing songs together, pray, and be sent out to share God's love with people. In the church, that many of whom have been told explicitly by people in the church that they do not belong, that God's love is not for them, and that if they wish to be a part of the church, it is necessary for them to hide a part of themselves, which is, of course, horribly destructive to them and the Christian church, because it's a lie. God's love is for everyone. And when we miss this part of God's identity, we are missing God's presence. So we are standing around waiting to get going, and a dude who is not a part of our group comes walking up to us and starts having a conversation with this young woman who is nearby, and who is a part of our group, I should say. And it starts off nice enough, and he is asking about her faith, and he is sharing about his, and pretty soon it becomes clear that he is not just being friendly or curious. Rather, he is a Christian who believes that gay people or non-gender conforming people, like this young woman, were not loved by God in the same way that a straight person like he was loved by God. That the natural love that they felt for someone or the way they naturally feel in their bodies was wrong and invalid, and a choice of living apart from God's will. And he was trying to convince or debate or sow doubt in her that she was doing the right thing by being at the Pride Parade and celebrating as a Christian, and that who she was as a person might actually not be valid in the eyes of the Creator. And gosh, do I hate that. So I spoke to the young man, ushered him over and had a conversation, and he eventually left with the help of a volunteer parade coordinator. And I checked in with the lady, and she was being very gracious with the conversation. Unfortunately, and presumably because this sort of thing had happened to her many times before, probably her whole life, from people in the church maybe people in the congregation that she grew up in. And the whole thing made me sad and a little angry. Because when people from the church, like this guy, a proclaimed Christian, place norms and boundaries and membership rules to God's love, turns into a real shame, which is a word I do not use lightly. Because he is missing something absolutely vital to the message of Jesus about welcoming people, especially people who are marginalized. And that young person who was with our church group will need to continue wondering if the church she is walking into for the rest of her life is safe for her, or if there is some Christian there who is going to deny her equal rights to be loved and welcomed by God equally. And I would never want that for anybody. Anyone. But sometimes our churches do make people have to ask those questions. Will I be welcomed? Will they recognize me? Will they include me, every part of me, my culture, my ability, my love? Will this church welcome me? And when they are denied that welcome, it is in opposition to how we are called to be as a church. Does that make sense? Now, I have been thinking about this interaction all week in regards to the text because Jesus is getting ready to send the disciples out, his friends out into the world to do what Jesus has been doing. And he is teaching them what the kingdom is supposed to look like. And there is a lot of text in this chapter that feels confusing. So just in case any of them had zoned out or were a little late to class that day, here at the end of chapter 10, Jesus summarizes the whole thing anyway. He is sending them out to love people, and people are supposed to receive them, and they are supposed to receive others. That's it. That's discipleship. Whoever welcomes you welcomes me, says Jesus. That's it. So use your imaginations and picture Jesus and the disciples in a conference room in an office building. Jesus is just cruising through his Discipleship 101 training course about picking up a cross and following him, talking about allegiance to God's way over the state, what sort of stuff they were and were not allowed to take with them on their trip, like extra money or clothes, where they were supposed to stay and with who, and 100 other things that we read about in chapter 10. And he wraps up the PowerPoint presentation, takes a sip of water, believes he just crushed his presentation. Matthew 10 is a great training course, a best practice standard. And this is a home run training. And ask if there are any questions. And the disciples just look at Jesus like a fish in an aquarium and respond, Jesus, I know you just kind of explained this, but what are we to do again? Jesus kind of says, welcome people, let them welcome you. That's it. That's enough. That's discipleship in a nutshell. And that might sound easy, but it certainly is not. It's not. True welcome is costly and uncomfortable sometimes. Some of you might be feeling uncomfortable right now. Maybe. Remember, though, Jesus was not killed, and the disciples were not chased around the Mediterranean and kicked out of temples because who they kept out of their tradition and what new rules they made or what new regulations they were trying to enact. They were killed, chased down, and persecuted because of who they welcomed in. and what boundaries they tore down. They were hated because of the grace they showed people. Think about that. It's still true, right? When we start to extend God's grace to people who have never had access to it, when we start to include people differently, there are a lot of people that get upset by that, and they get angry sometimes. Sometimes we get angry about who is being let in and who has access and power in new ways, and it makes us feel uncomfortable and jostles our understandings. And it's our call to lean into that and reflect why that might be. Why do we feel that? What's the issue? Is it about us? Is it about God? And do we need to do the difficult work to get rid of that thing that is keeping us from helping somebody else be in? Do we need to get rid of that thing that's limiting our welcome? What do we do when we are asked to welcome people we feel uncomfortable with? Maybe people that live outside, homeless people, houseless people. Maybe rich people. Maybe we have a problem with rich people. Maybe people who speak a different language, people who struggle with addiction, maybe someone who has been to prison, or people who put up different political signs than we do. What does it look like to welcome someone who doesn't conform to our sexual norms? Now, I was moved this week because for a long time, we as the Christian church have said, so long as you conform to this way, you are welcome. And if you don't, if it makes us feel uncomfortable, maybe you need to adjust who you are. But that doesn't sound like a Jesus that eats with anyone and everyone. And that doesn't sound like a Jesus who draws lines in the sand to free women accused of adultery. And that doesn't sound like a Jesus who touches people who society has deemed untouchable. That sounds like we're putting extra rules on welcome. But last Sunday at the parade, it really felt like we were welcoming and apologizing in a loud and visible way that for some people who have been hurt and rejected by the church, especially, it really mattered to them. People saw the church at their celebration in joy, celebrating with them and not condemning them. And it really mattered. It was a cup of cold water. Our Pride Walk is not going to fix everything, of course, just like posting about a Juneteenth celebration, adding a land acknowledgement to the beginning of a worship service, or having a study about immigrants is not going to rubber stamp inclusivity on everything we do. We still have places that require deep reflection in our lives that we all need to engage in, because how we welcome people is how we welcome God. If we take today's Discipleship 101 text seriously, our discipleship requires us to be reflecting and acting on the barriers that we put up on welcoming. Jesus says, whoever welcomes you welcomes me. It's not easy. Jesus doesn't say it's going to be easy to really welcome people how they are, and to eat with them how they eat, and to pray with them how they pray. It might make us feel uncomfortable sometimes at first, but it is how we encounter Christ. It is through welcoming people, different people, new people, strange people, funny people, gay people, homeless people, serious people, sick people, old people, young people, immigrant people, Asian people, poor people, rich people, black people, all people, that we meet God. For too long, the church has acted like this young man in the parade lineup with a fake smile and words that seem to extend welcome, but When push comes to shove, it is not welcome or celebration or inclusion. Something else. And it hurts the church. And it hurts people. If we in the church cannot welcome people, even the cast aside ones who ask for a cup of cold water, how can we welcome Jesus? Dear church, let us be a people that welcomes without boundaries, because God's love has no boundaries. Let us be a people who prophetically speak to systems of power that would keep other people away. And let us be a people of honest reflection and action of the work that we have left to do. Amen.